What kind of person sets fire to a police motorcycle in broad daylight, surrounded by neighbors, and thinks they'll walk away unscathed? That's the question that roared through my mind as I stood on the cracked asphalt of Maple Grove Lane, staring at the charred husk of my department-issued bike. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burning rubber and gasoline, and a crowd of wide-eyed residents whispered behind their manicured hedges. At the center of it all was Karen Whitaker, the HOA president, her arms crossed, her face a mask of smug defiance. She was a mountain of a woman, her floral dress straining against her frame, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. That eyesore had no business parked in our cul-de-sac. She snapped, jabbing a finger toward the smoldering wreckage. This is a respectable neighborhood. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't say a word. Not yet. I'd moved into Maple Grove 3 months ago, seeking a quiet life after years of high-stakes patrols on the state highways. My badge and uniform stayed in the closet most days. My role as highway patrol commander kept under wraps. To the neighbors, I was just Ethan Caldwell, the guy with the tidy lawn and the motorcycle they didn't like. Karen had been on me from day one, leaving passive-aggressive notes about my bike's improper parking or its unseemly noise. I'd ignored her, figuring she'd tire herself out. But this was no note. This was arson. And she wasn't even trying to hide it. The crowd parted as I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the gravel. Karen's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of unease beneath her bravado. She didn't know who I was. Not really. The story started innocently enough, or so I thought. Maple Grove was the kind of place where every mailbox matched. Every lawn was mowed to perfection, and Karen Whitaker ruled like a queen. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-appointed guardian of community standards. I'd heard the stories from my neighbor, Tom, a wiry electrician with a knack for gossip. Karen had fined misses. Larson for planting unapproved roses. Bullied the Nguyen family into removing their basketball hoop. And even reported a kid's lemonade stand for unpermitted commerce. Most folks grumbled but complied. I wasn't most folks. My bike, a sleek black Kawasaki with police stenciled on the side, was my pride and joy. I parked it in my driveway, well within HOA rules. But Karen hated it. It lowers property values, she'd told me once, her voice dripping with disdain. I'd shrugged and walked away. Big mistake. That morning, I'd been sipping coffee on my porch when I heard the shouting. Karen's voice carried like a foghorn, berating someone about unauthorized vehicles. I stepped outside just in time to see her dousing my bike with a can of lighter fluid, a lit match in her other hand. Tom and his wife, Maria, stood frozen on their lawn, pleading with her to stop. Karen, that's a police bike, Maria yelled, her voice trembling. Karen laughed, a harsh, grating sound, and tossed the match. Flames erupted, devouring the seat and tires. I sprinted toward her, my heart pounding, but the damage was done. By the time I reached the scene, the bike was a goner, and Karen was already spinning her story to the gathering crowd. He's not even a real cop, she scoffed, pointing at me. Just some wannabe with a toy bike. The accusation stung, but I held my tongue. I wanted her to dig her own grave. The truth started to unravel when Tom stepped forward. his face red with anger. Ethan's not just a cop, Karen. He's the highway patrol commander. The crowd gasped, heads swiveling toward me. Karen's smirk faltered, but she doubled down. Lies. She spat. If he's such a big shot, why is he living in a dump like this? I could have corrected her. Could have flashed my badge and ended it right there. But something stopped me. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to face the consequences without me pulling rank. I caught Tom's eye and shook my head slightly. Let her talk. Let her think she's winning. Maria, though, wasn't as patient. She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed 911. You're going to jail, Karen, she said, her voice low but firm. Karen's laugh was weaker this time, but she didn't back down. Not yet. Then came the twist. The kind of thing you don't see coming in a neighborhood like Maple Grove. As the sirens wailed in the distance, a teenage girl pushed through the crowd, her face streaked with tears. It was Lily, Karen's daughter, barely 16, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. Mom, stop it, she cried, her voice breaking. You can't keep doing this. She thrust the paper at me, and I scanned it quickly. A letter from the HOA board, signed by Karen, demanding thousands in fines from residents for petty violations. But at the bottom was a handwritten note in Karen's scrawl, divert funds to personal account. My stomach turned. Karen wasn't just a bully. She was a thief, skimming money from the neighborhood she claimed to protect. Lily's hands trembled as she spoke. She's been doing it for years. I found the receipts in her office. The crowd fell silent, the air heavy with betrayal. Karen's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time, she had no comeback. The police arrived minutes later. 2 officers I recognized from the precinct. They took one look at the burned bike, then at me, their eyes widening. Commander Caldwell, one of them said, snapping a salute. The crowd murmured, and Karen's knees buckled. She tried to spin another lie, claiming it was an accident, but the officers weren't buying it. They cuffed her hands behind her back, her protest growing shrill as they led her to the squad car. Lily stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, and Maria wrapped an arm around her. I felt a pang of pity, not for Karen, but for her daughter, who'd just exposed her mother's crimes to save her neighbors. The motorcycle was gone, a casualty of Karen's vendetta, but the real loss was the trust she'd shattered in Maple Grove. As the squad car pulled away, I knew this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The confrontation didn't end with Karen's arrest. The next day, Maple Grove was buzzing with rumors, but also with something new resolve. The residents gathered in the community center, a squat brick building Karen had once lorded over like a throne room. I stood at the back, still in civilian clothes, watching as Tom and Maria took the floor. They'd spent the night digging through HOA records, with Lily's help, and what they found was worse than anyone expected. Karen hadn't just been skimming funds. She'd been forging documents, hiking fines, and even threatening foreclosure on families who couldn't pay. The room erupted in outrage, voices overlapping as people shared their own stories of her tyranny. I stayed quiet, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just about my bike anymore. This was about justice. The meeting turned into a reckoning. Tom held up a stack of bank statements, his voice steady but fierce. She funneled over $50,000 into her own accounts, he said, slamming the papers on the table. Gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Larson, the elderly woman with the unapproved roses, stood up, her hand shaking. She told me I'd lose my home if I didn't pay her fines, she said, her voice cracking. One by one, others spoke, families driven to debt, kids scared to play outside, all under Karen's iron fist. I felt my fists clench. I'd seen plenty of power-hungry types in my years on the force, but this was personal. She'd preyed on her own neighbors, people who trusted her, and she'd burned my bike to make a point. The climax came when Lily took the stage. She was pale, her eyes red from crying, but her voice was steady. I didn't want to believe it, she said, addressing the room. She's my mom. But what she did was wrong. I'm so sorry. The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Then Maria stood, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. This isn't your fault, she said firmly. You did the right thing. The crowd nodded, some wiping tears. I stepped forward, finally breaking my silence. Karen's facing charges: arson, theft, fraud, I said, my voice calm, but carrying the weight of my badge. But this community is stronger than her. You're not her victims anymore. The room erupted in applause. Not for me, but for themselves. For Lily. For the truth. Karen's empire crumbled in the weeks that followed. The HOA board was dissolved, replaced by a new one led by Maria, who promised transparency and fairness. The fines were repealed, the stolen funds traced and returned. Karen's trial was swift. Her guilty plea spared everyone a drawn-out circus. But the judge didn't go easy. 7 years for arson and fraud, with more charges pending. I visited her in the county jail before sentencing, not out of kindness, but curiosity. She sat across from me, her bravado gone, her eyes hollow. I just wanted control, she muttered. This neighborhood was chaos before me. I leaned forward, my voice low. Control isn't leadership. You broke these people. They're rebuilding without you. She looked away, and I left her to her regrets. Maple Grove changed after that. The cul-de-sac where my bike burned became a gathering spot. Not for fights, but for barbecues and kids' bike races. Lily moved in with her aunt, but stayed close to the neighborhood, helping Maria with the new HOA. I got a new motorcycle, courtesy of the department, and parked it proudly in my driveway. No one complained. The scars of Karen's reign lingered, but they were healing. People waved to each other again, smiled without fear. I'd spent years chasing speeders and busting criminals on the highway, but this felt different. This was home. This was community. And in the end, it wasn't my badge that stopped Karen, it was the neighbors, standing together, refusing to bow. That's the kind of power no fire can burn out. End.